Hey everybody, come on in here. This is a special afternoon version of Coffee with Scott Adams featuring no coffee whatsoever. Today I'll be enjoying a delicious Zola coconut espresso. No, they do not pay me to advertise their product. I know you're wondering. Wow, we already got 700 or so people here. So, you're all watching the news, probably. You wouldn't be on this Periscope unless you were news-watching kind of people. And I know you've seen the following story. You saw the story of Fire and Fury, the Michael Wolff book, in which there were many rumors of people saying bad things behind the president's back. And that was all the news. That was like news, Michael Wolff, Fire and Fury, blah, blah, blah. Then you saw President Trump counter-program with his own persuasion. And we all saw it at this point. He did the open door meeting for the DACA meeting with Congress. And of course, even many of his enemies gave him high marks for looking in control and capable and competent, etc. It virtually wiped the Fire and Fury book off the headlines. It literally would be embarrassing to continue quoting the things in that book after people have seen this open door meeting. Now let me break down why that worked so well. Here's the problem with the Michael Wolff book. All of the bad things that is said about the president, for the most part, I think, were attributed to anonymous insiders. Now try to picture in your head an anonymous insider. You can't do it, right? It's a concept. Not only is it a concept, but it's not as grippy as it could be, because the things that people were alleged to have said, first of all, don't really sound true, because it seems pretty unlikely that 100% of the people are saying these things behind his back at the same time that he never acts like that in public. So the Michael Wolff book had no visual, and it had a credibility problem. Compare that to President Trump's counter-programming, in which he brought the cameras in and surprised everybody and let the media watch an actual meeting. Now, first of all, he got the surprise right, all right? Because surprise makes it a story. And that's what makes in part, it's what makes the news cover it over and over again. So he had this opportunity to inject a surprise, which guaranteed it became the headline, because when the president surprises, it doesn't matter how he's doing it, it's going to be the headline. But it was also insanely visual, right? It was also, audio, so we got to hear it. But by far, as I've been teaching you, persuasion-wise, the visual is just a 10x more powerful than just, say, a concept that's rolling around in your head. So if you are surprised that the president's persuasion play completely just eviscerated the whole Fire and Fury story, obviously it's never going to go completely away, but it took it from, hey, let's take this seriously, to I'm a little bit embarrassed that I took that seriously. He was that effective, and it happened almost instantly. But there's something else happening that's only partly related to this. That is the real reason I wanted to talk to you, and I didn't put it in the title of the Periscope, so this will be your little hidden treasure. What would you say has been the president's biggest problem, just in general, from the time he announced until now? What would you say is his biggest negative? The thing that, so somebody said race, that's correct. So the one thing that no matter what else he was doing well, the economy, ISIS, you name it, the racist accusations were just always there, like this horrible baseline thing. Now, if anybody is new to these periscopes, I don't believe the president is a racist. But it is a fact that half of the country or more believes he is, based on, I would say, mostly, bits and pieces of things that the media said that are mostly wrong. So, for example, the media largely said and believes, I think, that he said that the white supremacists in Charlottesville were fine people. Now, he did say that there were some fine people there, but it's pretty obvious, at least to me, that he wasn't talking about the white supremacists. In part because nobody would say that, even him. I mean, he says a lot of things, but even he wouldn't say that. Even if he believed it, he wouldn't say it. So it's crazy to imagine he did. What he clearly thought is that there must have been some other normal Republicans there, and he just didn't have the right information, and so he said there must be some fine people there. Turns out there weren't, in terms of the protesters. Actually, there were. There was a small group of people who were just there for freedom of expression and were not part of the white supremacists and didn't like the white supremacists. So he was technically right, but he didn't know it. Anyway, so that story got taken out of context, but people were holding in their mind initially that the white supremacists who were chanting anti-Semitic stuff, that somehow the president thought they were fine people, when the president has a Jewish daughter by conversion, Jewish son-in-law, one of his closest advisors, Jewish staff, Jewish grandkids, and then he goes and he recognizes Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, which nobody saw coming, I don't think. And so now the people who had been fooled by the media into thinking that the president had literally called white supremacists fine people, that didn't happen, but it was widely reported that it did, and you could see right in front of your eyes why they reported it, but it certainly was fake news. Now they have to hold in their head, how can it be somebody who supports these anti-Jewish groups, how could he be the one that Israel loves and is building, maybe naming a train station after him, and Netanyahu loves him, and he's the first president of this country to recognize Jerusalem. It starts to fall apart a little bit, all right? So that's one data point. So just hold that data point. You don't need to think about that too critically. You don't have to agree or disagree. I'm going to now paint for you a picture in which a number of data points are coming together entirely by coincidence that are creating a new persuasion wave that you didn't see coming. So the first one, and I think the Jerusalem recognition, was the first time that the people who thought he must have supported the people marching against Jews, that somehow they imagined in their head they could hold those two ideas together. Then, a number of things happened recently. One is that Bannon and the president had this public falling out. This seemed more about personality than it did about policy. But because Bannon was, as far as I can tell, the information I have from people who know him, he was not a racist but was painted as one. So he was really sort of a liability while he was close to the president. Because no matter the truth of Bannon's, personal opinions, people's impression of him wasn't going to change, and that was that he was, on the side of the, at least the alt-right, and they would be associated with racists, and so that was a big negative for the president. But by making that split, even though none of that had to do with anything about race, it makes you feel like there's some distance between a person who is, painting the president as a racist by association, and now he's separated. So now you got these two data points. You got the Jerusalem recognition, and now Bannon leaving. Together, they don't really mean much, but I'm going to keep going, right? So we're looking for a pattern of small persuasion that if you looked at any one, you'd say, well, that doesn't mean that much. But look at the pattern. Then you look at the DACA negotiations that we saw televised. Now, a lot of people would have thought, and of course the president said as much during the campaign, that he had no heart for the DACA folks, the so-called dreamers. But he's going to call it a love bill. Yeah, he called it the Bill of Love. And he spoke exactly not the way people who thought he was a frickin' racist should speak. Now again, if you were to look at just that one data point, you'd say, well, maybe he was forced into doing it and maybe he changed his mind. You could explain it away a lot of ways. And that's not my point today. My point is that there's this little wave of persuasion that's all related that if you didn't hear it all together, you wouldn't know it's coming. All right? So here's another one. By coincidence, it's Martin Luther King, week, and the president was at a photo op for, let's see, what is it? So here's a headline from NBC News. Trump designates Martin Luther King Jr. birthplace a National Historic Park. And then there's a lovely photo of him with Alveda King, niece of slain civil rights leader Martin Luther King, joined by Isaac Newton Ferris, nephew of Dr. King, etc. So it's this great photo op where he's signing a bill and there are three famous African-American figures nearby smiling. Now again, I know what you're going to say. Politicians sign things, they take photo ops. It means nothing. By itself, it doesn't mean anything. And I'm not claiming that it should. I'm just painting you a picture of all the things that are happening recently that are playing on our sort of uncritical mind right now. Here's another one. And this is my favorite one. I love this one. Well, let me give you another one and then I'll get to my favorite one. So by luck plus skill of the president, unemployment numbers are looking great. And the president was able to say that black unemployment rates are the best they've been in, 17 years or some number of years. Now, that probably was going to happen anyway, just because the economy was doing well. But the timing was sort of perfect because it happened about the time that these other things did. The getting rid of Bannon, the break with Bannon, the Jerusalem decision, the DACA meeting, the MLK signing, they just happened by coincidence, all happened about the same time, right? And then we hear the news that black unemployment rates are as good as they've been in many years. But here's my favorite one. Oprah teases like she might run for president. And I say teases because the way she gave her speech at the Golden Globes seemed to me that she was intentionally signaling some kind of political ambition. Now, I want to see if you can connect this dot before I get to the end point, because you're going to like this. The moment that Oprah, started to be part of the national conversation, at least most recently, she's been spoken of in this context for a long time, but it became news because of the Golden Globes. As soon as that happened, social media quickly came up with old clips, video clips of her saying things that they thought would embarrass her, etc. And of course, they found clips that featured both Oprah in the past talking to a younger Donald Trump. And so you could see that they were friends and obviously got along really well, all right? That doesn't mean anything, because if somebody said to you, hey, I'm not a racist because I have a black friend, you would just laugh at them, right? Right? That's like the standard joke. But it's a visual. And everybody who's looking at these clips of, oh, there's a coincidence. They both might run for president, and there they are talking to each other. There's Oprah, there's Trump, and they seem to like each other, right? So your irrational mind is just sort of processing this in some other context. The question of whether she'll run, you're not thinking, is he a racist? You're just in a different topic in your head. And so uncritically, you see lots of visuals of the president having a good relationship with Oprah, a obviously famous African-American figure. But that's not the good part. Then somebody discovered, I don't know if it was an old video or interview, I forget the context, and here's the fun part. Some time ago, it might have been 20 years ago, I don't know exactly, somebody can fact check me here. Some time ago, Trump was asked in an interview if he ran for president, who would he like as his vice president? And he said, Oprah. Have you connected the dots yet? Yeah. So that goddamn racist Donald Trump, he looked at all the potential running mates in the country and he picked Oprah. Right? Now, again, I'm going to go back to my theme. If you're looking at one thing, the fact that he has one black friend that he likes doesn't mean anything, right? Doesn't prove he's one thing, doesn't disprove he's anything. My point is how all of this coincidentally coming together has created an uncritical change in how people are perceiving him. And they're not going to realize it until they sort of look back and see that their mind has changed, but they don't know why. So let me summarize, especially for the people jumping in quickly. In the month of January, we've seen, completely by coincidence, several bits of information that all disprove in their own small ways, and not rationally or logically or in terms of science, but they disprove in terms of our uncritical view of things. They disprove the notion that President Trump is a darn old racist. And let me list them. There was the Jerusalem decision, which didn't make sense for someone who was accused of loving people who don't like Jews. There was Oprah announcing, which made us all see videotapes of Trump saying that he would pick her as vice president. Not exactly the biggest racist thing anybody would do. There was the DACA meeting we saw in which he was speaking with love about finding an accommodation with a wall. He still wants the wall, but how to accommodate the young dreamers who are already here. By total coincidence, it's Martin Luther King holiday coming up, and so he signed something for the Martin Luther King Jr. birthplace. They made a National Historic Park. He gets the photo op for that. Again, individually, doesn't mean anything, but we're painting the picture here. Then black unemployment hit a great rate. It was a really good historic level. He got to brag about that. Total coincidence, just happened to have happen this month. Bannon and Trump have a falling out. That gives him some distance from the biggest lightning rod, Bannon, for racist accusations. So now there's some distance there. And then there's one other thing that's really sort of a weird wild card. So you've been watching me do these Periscopes for a long time. And you probably know that some of them get, 8,000 viewers, and some of them will get, several tens of thousands of viewers. Do you know what my number one most viewed Periscope is? Does anybody know which one that is? And it got to number one this month. You're right. Yeah, I did a Periscope in which I was saying that Black Lives Matter, but more generally the black community, should take an opportunity to work on a deal with Republicans for whatever it is that they think needs to be fixed. I don't know exactly where that would come out. But to see if the Republicans would make a deal, an actual move to win their vote. Because the opportunity is there. President Trump could do what maybe some other Republicans just couldn't or wouldn't do. And I got a little bit of pushback on that, but most of the pushback about this suggestion that the black community should directly approach Republicans and say, hey, it's a good time for us to work together. You guys can stay in power. All the social stuff that, the big stuff, like, everything from gay marriage to whatever, that's mostly settled. That's not going to change. So you can work on economics. You can work on education. You can work on things where they can come together, such as, just to pick one example, and of many, charter schools, right? Many in the black community like them. Republicans like them. So they have all these ways they could work together, and this would be the time to really make a move and try to nail down some concrete benefits for both sides. So that idea, which you would imagine would have been very unpopular with the Republicans that you assume to be a bunch of darn racists, turned out to be my most popular Periscope of all time. So, and that indicates almost certainly that people are responding to it in a favorable way that goes beyond just the logic of it. In other words, they're sort of feeling it. And one of the unintended consequences of being a conservative and or Republican for the past 2 years is if your standard bearer, in this case President Trump, is being accused of being a racist, and you're not one, which would be the case for the vast majority of Republicans. If you're not one, you kind of are starting to feel some need to prove it, because there's just too much persuasion on the other side saying you are. So, anybody in the black community who's looking to make a dent in whatever issue they think is important, if they're talking to Democrats, it's wasted energy, because the Democrats already agree with you. There's nobody to convince, and they don't have the power that they need. Trump has the power, and he needs that support. It would be very helpful, and so does the GOP. So they should be talking to the GOP, because that's where all the leverage is. That's where you can really make a difference. All right, so my point today was that while we're not watching, the racism accusations against the president have largely, I'm not going to say disappeared, but they got pushed to the back burner for the last several weeks. And a lot of it's because of this complete coincidental, coming together in January of all these things. I'll list them again. There was a Jerusalem decision that doesn't look like a white nationalist did that. There's the tapes that came out saying that Trump would pick Oprah as vice president. He said that in the past. There's his flexibility over DACA. There's black unemployment is looking good just by coincidence. There's a break with Bannon. And then, as just sort of evidence that there might be some, movement, there's my Periscope that got my biggest numbers yet on the topic of Republicans trying to make a serious play for the black vote. Yeah. So I think I might keep this Periscope to that topic. Yeah, so Trump is getting credit from South Korea for talking to North Korea. There's a request for a simultaneous sip, and I believe this is the time. If you've got a beverage, this is the time. Grab your beverage. Let us hoist our beverages to the golden age where everything starts going right. Mm. Both hands. All right. Should we invent let's call it the Trump sip. It goes like this. Starts with two hands, and then this hand comes off. All right. So we're going to do a President Trump sip, as he taught us with his water bottle. Starts with two. Join me. Someday somebody's going to show that video as proof that I've had a stroke of some sort and that I've got mental problems. But that's all for today. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Not you, not you, not you, but you, and you. You're a pleasure to talk to. Not you. Well, you're okay. All right.